Okay, good morning to all. So let's continue on the topic that we started last week. So before we start, just want to bring back some of the things that we learned. So we know that SLFRS 9 being an important topic. First of all, now we need to know what are the two basic measurement methods, right? So one is the fair value and the other one is amortized cost. Okay, so those are the two important measurement methods. So fair value, of course, you know that is the accepted market value between two knowledgeable parties. Two knowledgeable parties. So when there are two knowledgeable parties transacting, this is the most accepted value between those two parties. And when you say amortized cost, it means the principal plus the accrued interest. Okay, accrued interest. So when you say principal, principal is the capital outstanding and the accrued interest. So if you take a loan given to a customer, the loan which is outstanding right now, the capital that is supposed to be paid by the customer or the borrower, plus the interest accrued to date from the last payment. When the customer makes monthly installments or annual installments, from that date to date, that is current date or maybe the reporting date, whatever the accrued interest will be your amortized cost. That is one. Then we also looked at the classification criteria where we have three. So namely, fair value through P&L, fair value through OCI, and amortized cost. And these three are based on two types of tests, which are known as SPPI test and the business model. Okay, and then I went on to explain how you look at SPPI, where it is solely principal payment of principal and interest, and then the business model, whether you want to hold to collect or hold to collect and sell, right? So these are the basics, or maybe say the fundamentals of SLFRS 9, which you need to know. But the problem here is, for examination purposes, I don't expect you to get questions like to classify them into the different categories, or maybe to look at how you can classify those stuff. But the basic things: what are the three types, what are the two tests, and the two measurement methods, like the fair value and the amortized cost. Okay, those are very, very important. And then going into the second part of this topic, where we spoke about the impairment. The impairment means what? That is what we want to learn. So I think when I did LKS 16, that is property, plant and equipment, the last section on LKS 16 was impairment of property, plant and equipment. Okay, I don't know how many of you can recall. That was the last section. So I said, we are not going to cover this at this moment, because you need to first know what is impairment. Then only you can start looking at how to make adjustments for that. Right. So now let's talk about impairment. Now, when you start using an asset, there is a wear and tear. There is a wear and tear. So if it is a fixed asset, you know what is going to happen. You have the mechanism called depreciation. You have the depreciation method called depreciation. But more than the wear and tear, there could be a loss in value. A loss in value. So this loss in value has to be accounted, or the expected loss in value has to be accounted, right? So there are various ways and means of doing it, but one such mechanism is impairment. So basically, the term impairment means if you are expecting, or if you have incurred any there is a probability of incurring a loss, then you need to make adequate provision for that. You need to make adequate provision for that. Say, for example, if you are supposed to pay electricity bill, then before the financial year is over, you need to make a provision. So this provision is to cover up whatever the expenses that you are supposed to incur during the financial year. Now, similarly, before the end of the financial year, if you expect there could be a loss or probability of making a loss from a particular asset, not from the business. We are not talking about the business, right? If there is a probability of incurring a loss or making a loss from a particular asset, then you need to make a provision for that. And that provision is known as impairment. That provision is known as impairment. Now the question is, where should we provide impairment? Where should we provide impairment? So I have already said that it is the loss in value. Loss in value. Right. Now, when it comes to SLFRS 9, you know, there is fair value through P&L, there is fair value through OCI, there is amortized cost. Okay. So these are the three classifications. So any asset that you can think of coming under SLFR, because impairment is also coming under SLFRS 9. So the classification, the probable classifications of assets are also under SLFRS 9 is these three. So now, when you look at this, where and where this impairment could be possible, where and where this impairment could be possible, it's very straightforward. Why? This says it's fair value. You see? Here also it says fair value. So you don't have to worry. Why? The probable loss in value that we are thinking of, or if there is a probability of making a loss, those are covered when you do the fair valuation. At the year end, if you are doing a fair valuation, which means the loss or probable loss or gain, it could be both. So I can recall the LKS 40, where under investment properties we learned that investment properties will be subject to fair valuation. Every year you need to do a fair valuation. Now this is the same thing that I am talking about. So as at the reporting date, you need to do a fair valuation for these two. So if you are doing a fair valuation, which means the loss or in value or probable loss in value, or it could be a gain also. Need not be always a loss. It could be a gain also. So when it comes to these two types of assets, classification of assets, it is covered by doing a fair valuation. I already explained this, right? when you say fair value through P&L, if you have a share which is being traded in the stock market, so this share is now subject to changes in prices. Changes in prices. So let's say you bought a share at 100 rupees, right? Now, as at 31st December 2020, when you looked at the price of this share, let's say it was 120. I'm just taking an example. So what happens here? From every share that you have under fair value through P&L, you will get rupees 20. What is it? A gain. A gain. But let's now look at the next reporting date, which is 31st March 2021. So we have already ended the the first quarter. Now, 31st March 2021, let's say the share price is only 95. Share price is only 95. Now, what has happened? Now, actually speaking, this share has a loss of 5 rupees. Do you understand? This share has a loss of 5 rupees. But I'm not going to compare with this now. This is at day 1. When I brought in the share first, but now I have been changing the value because I have been doing a fair valuation. So the last value that I have in my book is 120. Now I need to compare this share with this 120. Now look what is going to happen. The gain that you have 20, now it is going to change into a loss of rupees 25. Rupees 25. This is the fair valuation from one day to another date. So when you do this fair valuation for a asset in fair value through P&L, the gain always goes to the P&L. If you do it for an asset in fair value through OCI, then it goes to the OCI. And from there it goes to the OCI reserve or fair valuation reserve. But now what we are talking about is not about this. This is done. So the problem comes here with the assets that you have classified under amortized cost. So for the assets under amortized cost, there is no way of doing a fair valuation. There is no way of doing a fair valuation. It will be subject to impairment. So impairment is a different process altogether for assets which are classified as amortized costs. Assets which are classified as amortized costs. So basically, from the context of your examination and from the context of the bank, the impairment is mostly affecting the loans and advances of your business. The loans and advances of your business, right? So the amortized cost means there could be a lot of other assets also. There could be treasury bills, treasury bonds, those are there. But even for those also there could be impairment. We are not saying no, it's not. But mostly it is going to impact the loans and advances of the business. Okay, so that is where we stand. So I also explained to you when there is a loan, or not the loan, actually it's a debtor, bad debt. So I gave you an example last week to explain when you do a credit sale that if the sale is, if the debtor doesn't pay within the stipulated credit period, what happens? Then it becomes, if you think that it is doubtful that the debtor will not pay, then you have to start making provisions, right? So that is in the case of a bad debt. But now what we are talking about is somewhat little standard where it says impairment. So with that, we will move on to right. So I hope everybody can see the screen properly, the presentation.
Yes, sir.
Right, let's start. So now what is happening here is, if you look at a loan given to a customer, the loan has a life in the bank. Let's look at it from the point of view of a bank. So if you look at a loan, it has a life. This life is known as the maturity period of the loan. Because when you give a loan, you agree with the borrower, okay, I'm giving you a loan today. You need to pay it off within a period of 5 years. So your maturity date is set from today after 5 years, right? And you also agree with certain other terms and conditions where you will agree on a monthly installment or maybe a quarterly, whatever, and how that installment is made up of, how much of capital, how much of interest, and also most importantly, you will agree on what is the interest rate. What is the interest rate applicable for the loan? So there are so many things that you agree with the borrower, which you do it by way of a offer letter. We call it as an offer letter. So in that offer letter only, all the terms and conditions are there. But I don't think that none of the borrowers would read through, as we also do. Like if you look at a credit card application, there are a lot of terms and conditions. But I don't think any of us go through that and read what is there. Similarly, with your employment contract, when you signed your contract, I wonder how many of you read the contract, employment contract. Okay. So even though we look at the terms and conditions, or maybe the terms of the contract, maybe very too much of complex things. But to make it very simple, what do? We look at the most important elements, like what is the loan amount, how long I have to pay, how do I pay, like what is the installment, how the installment is made up of, how much of capital, how much of interest, then what is the interest rate. Those are the most important intricacies that we look at. Okay, so look at the life of the loan now. So origination means you have given the loan. You have given the loan. So from that date, there is a commitment on the side of the borrower to pay this loan as agreed. To pay this loan as agreed, right? So now what happens? As long as this borrower pays the loan on time or before time, or maybe after the time period, still we are not much worried. As long as the borrower is paying, we call it as servicing. As long as the borrower is servicing the loan, we are not bothered, right? Because there is no issue. He is servicing the loan means whatever the money that we have given plus the interest that we expect is collected by us. There is no issue. But the moment the borrower shows signs of not paying the loan or not making any effort to pay the loan, then only all these impairment, provisioning, everything comes into the picture. Until such time, there is no requirement. Okay. So according to the current rules, which are governed by central bank, the banks are required to make provisions based on the guidelines provided by CBSL. Now, when we say guidelines provided by the CBSL means, as of now, there are time-based provisions. We call it as time-based provisions. So, if the customer or the borrower doesn't pay for a certain period of time, you start making provisions. That is how the current practice is. Okay, right. So, what we do is, before I go into the slide that is shown on the screen, let me give you some background so that with that background understanding, you will understand this better. Right. Now, let us agree on a loan. Right. Let's say 5 million loan. I'm just taking some numbers. Don't worry about whether it is the installment, everything is correct. At the rate of, let's say 10%. Term is, let's say 5 years. Right. So roughly we'll say 5 years means it is about how many? 60 months. It's about 60 months. Maybe this is right. Okay. Let's say monthly installment. I call it as monthly installment. Let's say 100,000. Okay. So don't worry about whether it is 100,000 or not. Don't worry about it. I'm just taking an example. Now, let's assume the loan is given to the customer and the customer is also paying. Customer is also paying. Monthly, he is paying the loan. So let's assume a point. Now say this is the origination, right? This is the origination. Now I am referring to the same thing that was in the slide, but I'm going to change it slightly differently. Okay, let's say origination. Origination means the date that you have granted. And let's say this is the maturity. What do you mean by maturity? Maturity is the date where the customer has to completely pay off the loan. He has to pay and complete. That is the date. Right. Now let's say you have installments. You have installments. So all this time the customer has been paying. Okay. And I'm just taking some dotted lines. Right. Now we come to a point where this is the last installment paid. This is the paid installment. And at that point in time, let's say the loan outstanding balance is rupees. Don't go by this side. I'm just looking at a little point. Let's say 4 million. So now still from here to here, the customer has to pay 4 million. Right. And this was paid, let's say, on the 25th of December 2020. Right? This is where the customer has paid the last installment, 100,000 was paid on that day. So you know now the next installment is due on 25th of January 21. And the next installment is due 25th of February 21. And the next installment is due 25th of March 21. I'm just keeping it to that for the timing. Okay, and it will go on as it is. Right. Now I'm going back to the timeline. Let's assume that we have reached 25th of January 2021. So everybody know that it is under COVID and there are so many other issues. So now the customer didn't pay the installment. But all this time he has been paying, right? All this time he was paying. So we don't have an issue. We don't have a doubt also on the customer thinking that we will not pay. Right? So what do you mean by this? When he has not paid means 30 days have gone. So from the last payment up to 30 days he has not paid. Right, fine. Now we reach 25th of February. The customer doesn't pay. The customer doesn't pay. What happens? Another 30 days gone. Another 30 days. So theoretically, the central bank says, when you reach this point, okay, when you reach this point, theoretically, the customer has not paid the loan for 60 days. Am I correct? From the last payment, the customer has not paid for 60 days. So which means there is now little bit of a doubt on the part of the bank to say that this guy might not pay. This guy might not pay. Now we have a little bit of a doubt saying that there is a probability that this person will not pay. Okay. So now the central bank wants us to be little bit caution. Little bit caution. Caution means you have to be very careful. Why? The borrower is now showing signs of not paying the loan, not paying the loan. So basically, at this point in time, the loan has to be classified as, we call it as non-performing. So you are supposed to classify this loan as a non-performing loan. So generally what happens, we talk about, there are multiple definitions on this. We call it as 60 days overdue. 60 days overdue, right? In terms of classification of the loan into non-performing. Okay, classification of the loan into non-performing. So you have to be very careful how you do it. Okay. So thereafter what happens? The central bank, now if the customer continues to not to pay, the central bank also alerts us, look, now this is a serious case, so you need to start making provisions. So which means now there is a loan loss provision coming in. Where the customer is not paying means that's a signal to you. There is a problem with the customer where he is not going to pay you. So then you need to start absorbing the loss by way of provisions. And these provisions are known as specific provisions. Okay. So I want you to take down at this time. Please take down this diagram and then we will make a small note before going further. Please take down. Okay, right. You can take down. According to the CBSL guidelines, that is Central Bank of Sri Lanka, CBSL guidelines, credit facilities, that is loans, right? Credit facilities, which are repayable in monthly installments, which are repayable in monthly installments, which are repayable in monthly installments. And 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 three installments are not paid. Sorry, three consecutive installments. You have to say consecutive. Three consecutive installments. When three consecutive installments are not paid, comma, the loan or the credit facility will be classified as non-performing. Within brackets, you say, 60 days overdue. 60 days overdue. 60 days overdue. So what do you mean by that? There are three installments. When the three installments are not paid means you have to put this customer on 25th of March as NPA or NPL, whatever. Right? So what does it mean? 60 days overdue means the first payment was due on this date. You see? This has gone due for 60 days. This has gone due for 60 days. Okay? Right. Next line, next para. If the borrower does not pay six consecutive installments. Now we are talking about six, not three. Another three is going up. Another three is becoming due. Six consecutive installments does not pay six consecutive installments, then the bank needs to the bank needs to start making provisions, start making provisions, start making provisions, start making provisions. Within brackets, you say specific provisions on the loan, on the loan. Right? So that is the background with regard to the loan loss provisioning. So what we are talking about here is basically under the CBSL guideline. But now when it comes to financial reporting, this CBSL provisioning is no more. Because even the central bank as well as the Colombo Stock Exchange or maybe the CA Sri Lanka does not consider this loan loss provisioning under CBSL methodology hereinafter. Okay. So in the diagram, if you look at it, from the origination and up to the point where it comes to NPL or a non-performing loan, there is no problem. But thereafter, what is happening? You need to start making provisions. You need to start making provisions. And sometimes if the customer never pays, you may have to write off the loan. Write off the loan means that's a complete loss to you. No option. Right? So that is how the loan works under the CBSL mechanism. Now what happened? When we were doing the CBSL provisioning, then came at some point in time, in way back in 2012, we started looking at this LKS 39, which I already explained to you at the beginning of this topic. So under LKS 39, also this impairment subject was there. So according to LKS 39, they don't say that you need to wait for the loan to become non-performing. You can start before that and start making provisions. Now that is the point where we say, you can see that in the diagram, we call it as OE, incurred loss. That OE stands for objective evidence. Please take down. Objective evidence. OE means objective evidence. Now, objective evidence means now you might get to know something bad about the customer. Say one of his factory is closed, or maybe the main business partner has passed away, or you might get to know something bad about the business. So which means that is an indication to you that this loan is not going to be paid, or maybe say there will be default by the customer. So it's like the signs. We call it as objective evidence in accounting terms, but basically that is called as signs of default, signs of default. Now when we go further on this topic, there will be a special name given, but this is the start. This could be the starting point where this customer might not pay your installment. Customer might not pay your installment. So maybe say a customer, the borrower becoming mentally handicapped. That is also could be possible due to stress or something. He can turn into like that, and he can't run a business thereafter. So obviously your loan will not be paid. So that point we call it as objective evidence of incurred loss. Objective evidence of incurred loss. So what we say here is that is the point where we understand the bad point is starting of the customer. Right? This is not always, because there could be customers who have become bad and non-performing, and then later on they come and settle the full thing. We are not talking about that extreme. What we are talking about is when we are required to make provisions, right? So under the CBSL guidelines, Even if the loan becomes NPL, still you don't need to provide provision. When it starts, when it is 6 installments due. Okay. But under the LKS 39, sorry, this whole concept of impairment started at the point where it is objective evidence of incurred loss. So basically LKS 39 was looking at a model called incurred loss model. Incurred loss model. And with 31st December 2017, LKS 39 was cracked. And what we have from 1/1/2018 is now SLFRS 9. So the red color bar shown there is basically the SLFRS 9. Now what does SLFRS 9 says? Look, you can't wait that loan till goes into bad, that is non-performing, or you can't wait till the customer has objective evidence. You have to expect now from day one itself, the customer might default, which is a probable scenario. You give a loan today, the customer defaults from the very first installment. Possible, right? Because under these scenarios, or maybe there could be customers who might not kickstart the business. They might borrow money to do the business, but they are never kicked off. So under the SLFRS 9, what do they say? When you start, or when you give the loan on day one, which is the origination date, from that date, you start making provisions. That is impairment provisions. So that concept is basically called the expected credit loss model. Expected credit loss model. So that is what I'm trying to explain. Under CBSL, it is a time-based provision. I told you, 3 installments, you put it to non-performing, 6 installments, you start making provision. All those are time-based. Okay. Now, when it comes to LKS 39, you have a rule-based provisioning. Rule-based means now they say, when you have signs of default from the customer, which is called the objective evidence, you need to start making provisions. But they called it as, or termed it as, the incurred loss model. But when it comes to SLFRS 9, here comes, you straight away go into provisioning from day one, which they call it as expected credit loss model. Expected credit loss model. Okay. So don't worry about the stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. I will explain it later. Don't worry at this point in time.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
If according to the LKS 39,
yeah,
customer not able to pay off the credit facility.
Okay.
Because of his illness or whatever the thing.
Right.
So
right.
in that point, bank can use the bank insurance.
Basically, you don't insure a loan, right?
Insured a loan, because when we are getting the mortgage ones or a personal loan,
no. That
is that applicable for that?
That is the last point of resort. Now, say I told you about the life of the loan. So during the life of the loan, there are stages where you can execute the mortgage. Now, if it is a property mortgage, let's say, there is a time period where when you can execute, because you have to go for litigation. There are so many proceedings. So you, just because the customer has not paid 3 installments, you can't execute the mortgage. But the same can be done when you have given a loan for, let's say, you give a pawning advance, right? You lend them against a gold article. So there the provision is there. When after the maturity period, if the customer has not paid, you can go for auctioning. You can auction the pawned article and then you can recover your money. Or maybe when you give a loan against a deposit, what happens? Say you take a fixed deposit of the customer and you give a loan against that. So at maturity, if the customer doesn't pay, you can uplift or redeem the fixed deposit and settle your loan, because that is when you have the letter of set off. With the offer letter, you take from the customer a letter of set off. But for property mortgage and so on, you will not do it, because that is a legal procedure. It has to go through the legal procedure, and then only you can go for parate. We call that as parate execution. You have to go for parate execution, and then only you can execute the property and put it for auction. So that's a long procedure, right? So here what we are talking about is, now from a provisioning perspective, we are not looking at that. I am agreeing with you for to a certain extent, which we will discuss in a short while. The security given by the borrower, or we call it as collateral. The collateral given by the customer is taken into consideration. But here what we are learning is from the accounting perspective, not from the operational perspective. What you referred is from the operational perspective, whether we can claim insurance and so on. No, that's not relevant to this topic. That we have to leave that aside. If you are doing credit, maybe say, I don't know whether there is a lending subject, maybe in that it is relevant. But from an accounting perspective, what we need to look at, we don't look at the insurance part of it, because that is not relevant to us. What we can look at is when this loan is becoming bad, or maybe there is an objective evidence, or whether I need to start from day one, and what are the collateral that are available to me only can be considered, because what I am making here is only a provision. There is no cash flow impact, because I am not going to settle the loan, or I am not going to sell the collateral and take money. It's only a book entry of making provisions. Am I clear?
Thank you, sir.
Right. So with that backdrop, let's move on with the now we don't have to worry about the CBSL provisioning as well as LKS 39 provisioning. Don't worry about those, because those are not currently in scope. What we have to look at is only the SLFIRS 9 based provisioning. So now the impairment takes two forms. Namely, we call it as individual impairment and collective impairment. Individual impairment and collective impairment. So how you do individual impairment is where we look at some internally developed models used for this individual impairment. But collective impairment is also using some models, but these are known as scientific models. Scientific models. So basically, when you talk about impairment, now the impairment takes two forms. One is known as the individual impairment. The other one is collective impairment. Okay, right. So before we go into that, I just want to explain this on the board. Right. Now let's take a bank. It's easy for me to explain it using a bank. So because impairment is mostly affecting the banks. Let's say there are borrowers A, B, C, D, and E. Okay. And the loan outstanding is outstanding balance, let's say 150. I'm talking about in terms of millions, rupees millions. 25, 23, 255, and 100. Okay, I'm taking 5 loans. Just for example, I'm taking 5 loans. Okay, right. Now, the 5 loans which are appearing here will be subject to 2 types of impairment. 2 types of impairment, which we call it as individual impairment and collective impairment. Individual impairment and then collective impairment. Now the question is, how do I go about individual impairment and how do I go about collective impairment? I make this right. Okay, 145. How do I go about individual impairment? How do I go about collective impairment? So now you just go and look at the slide that we were looking at last. What was that slide? Where are the 2 classifications? Where the 2 classifications are? It says based on an internally defined threshold, significant loans are identified. Then the loans with the objective evidence are subject to impairment. Right. Now look at this. In order for me to decide on whether I should apply individual impairment or collective impairment, I need to decide upon an internally defined threshold. Internally defined threshold. So I have 5 loans. I have to decide which are the loans which will be subject to individual impairment and what are the loans which will be subject to collective impairment. Right. Now, what I do this for this purpose is the bank will make its policy decision. There will be a policy decision made by the bank to see that all loans which are having an outstanding balance which is more than 150 million will be subject to individual impairment. So this is known as the threshold. This is known as the threshold. Now look what is going to happen. Okay. So now let's look at what are the loans which are above the threshold. So my threshold is 150 million outstanding. So if that is the case, I'm not going to take this loan. I'm not going to take this. I'm not going to take this. Or let me change it slightly, or you might think the first 3 loans I will take and the remaining not. Right. So first loan 145 million means less than 150, so I'm not going to take it. Second one 175 million, I will take it. Third 73, I won't take it. Fourth 255, I will take it, and the last one I won't. So what does this mean now? What am I supposed to do? I have only 2 loans which are subject to individual impairment. I will call it as II, individual impairment. The remaining loans are subject to collective impairment. Collective impairment. You see? So 2 loans are subject to individual impairment, 3 loans are subject to collective impairment. But what do? I need to evaluate these loans, 2 loans, individually. I need to evaluate these loans individually. But the other 3 loans, I will put it into one single basket. I will put them into one single basket. And then only I will apply the scientific model. This This is like using a depreciation method for depreciating assets. Likewise, in order to get the collective impairment, what do? I will identify an internally defined threshold. Based on the threshold, anybody above that threshold, I will put them into individual impairment. And I will look them very closely. Other loans, I will put everything into one basket and apply scientific models for my impairment purposes. Okay, so please take down. Okay. So now let's look at so what does it say? Individual impairment based on an internally defined threshold, significant loans are identified. So I have identified the significant loans based on the threshold, and then I will subject them to a objective evidence test. Okay, so what we learned as objective evidence earlier is what is that, right? And there is a method how to calculate the impairment, which is very important because in the examination this has been already tested. And then collective impairment, of course, is somewhat a complex topic, so which we are not going to go in detail, but whatever that is necessary for the examination, that I will cover for so that you can answer the examination question. Okay, right. Then individual impairment on loans and advances. So bank assess the loans and advances individually for impairment on the basis of materiality. So what do you mean by materiality here? That is the amount that you decide. Now here we said 150 million. Another banks would say, no, my threshold would be 200 million. It doesn't matter. Depending on the materiality, every bank will decide an amount for themselves. Okay. So exposures of loans and advances above a predefined threshold are assessed individually for significant increase in credit risk. Now this is where I said there will be a new term coming in. Now earlier we call it as objective evidence. No, the same thing now slightly differently word termed like significant increase in credit risk, which means when the loan was given, the customer was good. He has the capacity, he had the capacity, his business was doing well, everything was fine. But as we move on, when the customer showing signs of default, means the customer's credit risk has significantly increased. That is what it means. And there are indications how to identify whether the customer's credit risk has significantly increased, which we will see shortly. Right? And exposure of a loan means the customer's capital outstanding and with or without the accrued interest. So this is what we call it as amortized cost. Amortized cost, the capital and the interest or without interest, anything. Right? So this is just an example. This is another example for the thresholds. So threshold can be defined in various ways. You can have where the customers all loans put together. If the customer has 5 loans, you take the outstanding of all 5 loans. And if it is greater than 150 million, you say that this is a significant customer. Or if the customer's individual loan is 75 million or above, that is again you can say subject to individual impairment. So these are various examples where you can think of for the customer's threshold for individual impairment. Okay, you have to remember this because that is there in examination, it has been tested. How the individual impairment workflow works. First, you will look at a customer whether they are individually impaired, right? So I'm taking an example, more than 200 million. All loans which are more than 200 million, you will subject them to individual impairment, which is the next test to see that whether there is significant increase in credit risk. If not, what you will do is they will put under collective impairment, right? So if the customer's exposure is not more than 200 million, you will straight away put them to collective impairment. If not, you come to look at the significant increase in credit risk. If there is significant increase in credit risk, you will test them whether they can repay, whether they can repay. If there is no significant increase risk, you will again put them to collective impairment. If the customer is having the ability to pay, then you have to look at it separately. If not, you have to again put the customer into collective impairment. Okay. If the customer has the ability, not having the ability to repay the loan, then how to calculate the impairment will be slightly different. That is where you need to know how to compute the impairment. Okay, so that we will look at now. Okay. Now let's say you have identified a customer. Let's say customer XYZ. Let's say company, and their current loan outstanding is 223 million. Just for example, I'm taking. So capital plus interest, whatever you call it, we'll say this is the total amount, which means that is the amortized cost. Okay. And as you mentioned earlier, let's say this customer has given a property as mortgage, which is worth 250 million. 250 million, or let's say more than that, just for simplicity, 250 million, right? Now this is the scenario. So you do the individual impairment test. So your threshold is 150 million. So obviously this customer will be subject to IIP. Individual impairment. Now the question is, yes, this customer is above the threshold, so I will need to put it under individual impairment. What is the next step? I will check whether this customer has significant increase in credit risk. Whether the customer's credit risk has increased. Means initially when I gave the loan, no problem. This customer was doing well. But now you are getting some indications. Their latest financial position, they have made a loss. Their profitability, they have made a loss. One of their factories were closed down. Okay, one of their factories were closed down. So likewise, there are so many indicators which you might get to know. Loss in profitability, turnover coming down. We will look at those. I will go through just quickly the list that probable list. So there is significant increase in credit risk. Yes. Then I will need to see that customer under individual impairment for further testing. What do? I need to go and check whether, or with all these problems, whether this customer is still capable of paying the loan, paying the monthly installment. If you think yes, now this is a judgment of the credit officer. If you still think that yes, this customer will still pay me the loan installment as agreed, no problem. Then you can straight away move this loan to collective impairment. But if you think that no, this customer is not in a position to repay because already he is into a loss and one of his factories are closed down, so there are a lot of problems for this customer. He is not going to pay me. Then comes we call the cash flow. Now, what is the cash flow that you might expect from this customer? In future, do you expect any cash flows from this customer? Sometimes the customer might come and tell you, look, right now I have a problem, I can't pay you, but maybe in 1 year's time, I will be able to pay because I'm going to close down one of my factories and sell it. That is one option. But if the customer is currently saying, no, look at, I don't have any options. I don't know how to pay this loan. I have no options with me. Then the only option, as one of you pointed out earlier, the only option available to you is this. You might have to start proceedings on the litigation proceedings on the execution of the property. But that is the operational side of it. What we are doing here is accounting. So for accounting purposes, I need to make a call whether I have any future cash flows. If so, I have to take that and compare. Since I don't have a future cash flow, what I can look at is this. So this is going to be my future cash flow. I am expecting this property to be sold in 3 years' time. Okay. Now I am here on 31st December 2020. I am taking an example. So I am here on 31st December 2020. I am expecting that if the customer doesn't pay this for the next 3 years, somehow within the next 3 years, I will sell, go through the legal procedure and get approval to sell this property by auction and get the money and settle my loan. So after 3 years' time, you expect this property to be, let's say, 375 million. 300 after 3 years, right? After 3 years, you expect this to be 370 million. Now, what do? You are doing the calculation here, being on 31st December. So, what do? You have to discount this to this. We call it as present value of future cash flow. Present value of future cash flow. So I know after 3 years' time, this will be 375 million. But how much is it today? That is present value. So let's say when you discount it, it comes up to 285 million. 285 million. Now look at the scenario. Your amortized cost is 223 million. Your present value of future cash flow is 285 million. So what do you think? I have a loan which is 223 million outstanding, but I have a collateral. So if I sell this collateral today, I can get 285 million. So Am I better or not? I only need to recover 223 million, but I have 285 million in my kitty. So which means your amortized cost is less than the present value of future cash. So there is no impairment provision. There is no impairment, not required, because I need to recover only 223, but if I sell the property, I can get 285. So I don't need to worry. I will recover the 223 and will give the 62 million balance to the customer. I don't have an issue. Right? So this is one scenario. This is one scenario. Okay? Let's look at another scenario. Due to some reason, let's assume this scenario 1. Scenario 2, due to some reason, this property has gone down in value. Let's say it is about 290 million or 260 million. And when you do the present value, it's only 201 million. 201 million. Now your amortized cost is 223 million. Now what happens? Your amortized cost is greater than the present value. I am saying I need to recover 223 million, but I only get 201 million. So what happens? There is a difference of 22 million. This is what my individual impairment. You see? So the two scenarios. One is where you get no impairment because your present value of future cash flow is more than the amortized cost. The second scenario where my amortized cost is more than the present value of the future cash flow. As a result, I get an impairment of 22. Okay? Please take it down with a proper understanding. The two scenarios. Okay, can we go to the presentation? So the approach is actually threefold. I told you, first one will be the identification of significant increase in credit risk, and then where you have to project cash flows, and thirdly, you have to validate the results. Validate the results means where you need to check whether there will be an impairment provision comparing the amortized cost versus the present value of future cash flows, right? So let's quickly run through the remaining part here, because this is not very important as per our topic is concerned, because for exam this remaining area is not that much very critical, but just you need to know few things. Okay, so identification of SICR, that is significant increase in credit risk, or what could be the objective evidence, what could be the objective evidences. So as a person who is looking at from a financial perspective, what is the best thing that we can do is to look at the financial statements of the customer, right? I told you when we were doing the financial ratios, this is one such indicator to identify and know about your customer. So if there are significantly adverse financial ratios or indicators that are there in the customer, means those are signs of default, or those are known as indication of significant increase in credit risk. Okay, that is one. Then there could be significantly adverse future outlook. The country might not do well. Now say in the current context, you know, the tourism sector is badly affected because of the COVID-19 and previously due to the Easter Sunday attacks. The country's tourism sector is badly affected. So all companies which are in the tourism sector, like say hotels, those who are doing tourist transport, so many things, all those companies are finding it very difficult to run their operation. Okay. Then you have statutory indicators where default of tax payments, issue of garnishee orders, so many things. Then you might also have indications of breaching contracts, right? That is also one of the. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to not going to do in detail, but you all can always go through this in detail. The next few slides are that. Under each category, I have given you detailed explanation of what it is. Okay. So you can easily read and understand that. That is not a very difficult thing. It's written in normal, understandable language. So you can go through that and understand it. Okay. And also, I just run through here and there with regard to natural catastrophes. Like now say we have continuous floods. Continuous floods means what happens? The businesses that are in that particular locality will be badly affected. Or where there is drought, the companies which are dependent on agricultural activity, due to drought, what will happen? All those companies will not have any business. Okay. These are like just for your reading purpose, not really where you need to look at from an exam perspective. What you need to is some basic things from this. Say, for example, indicators that the borrower will enter bankruptcy. Bankruptcy means you are no more, you can't do anything. So it could happen with the death of the borrower, or as I told you, with the serious adverse health condition. Say where the borrower met with an accident and he's totally handicapped. He's unable to work, or he's unable to run his business, which means that's a serious issue for you to recover the loan. Okay. So what I have given here is what are the probabilities or possibilities that the customer might get into trouble and not pay your loan. Okay. Right. Then phase 2, as I told you, you will project cash flows. Okay. When you will get, now say that it has to be based on the time period and then it has to be discounted. So the discounting will happen using your original rate of the loan. If you have given the loan at 10% means you can use the same rate to discount the cash flows. And then finally, you will look at the results validated. Okay. That is all about individual impairment. When we do the questions, you will understand what it is. Now we come to the point of collective impairment, where we may not be able to go in detail into this because this is a vast topic, but I don't expect the examiner also to test this in depth. Okay, because it's very difficult. With an examination, you can't test this in depth because it varies from one bank to the other, so it's very complicated. So what we need to know is this. First of all, under the collective impairment, you know, all loans which are not subject to individual impairment will be put here. Can you remember the basket that I was talking about? Right. Now, in this, what we need to know is about, I will take you through to the first example or the diagram that I draw in the board, where I showed you the customer doesn't pay 3 installments. Customer doesn't pay 3 installments. Can you remember? There were 30 days, 30 days, 30 days. So altogether there were 90 days. Right. These number of days are known as days past due. Days past due. We call it as DPD. You can see here. DPD means days past due. Right. So this is the same diagram that I showed you at the beginning. There is a origination. Then you reach 30 days past due, objective evidence, then you reach the 90 days past due, loss and the write-off. Can you remember? It's the same diagram. Now see what is going to happen. Under this collective impairment, we need to do something called staging. Again, this staging means it's like a classification. It's like a classification. So what do you do? All loans which are just granted or within 30 days past due, we call them under stage 1. We call them under stage 1. From,
excuse me, sir.
Okay.
In the according to the SLFRS 39, this is if we grant a loan for the customer in the first of day only, we are calculating the stages. Is it?
This is SLFRS 9, right?
Yeah, 9.
Yeah, under SLFRS 9. Now, under LKS 39, I said it is the incurred loss model. Right? Now, here we have to start from day 1 itself, which is the origination.
The customer whether pay or not, we
have to start making provisions.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Right. So that's why we are looking at stage 1. Stage 1 means now we have just given the loan, but we are not sure whether this customer will pay or not pay. It doesn't matter. Accounting says, now since you have given a loan today, from day 1, there is a risk. So basically you need to understand the concept of impairment is just to minimize the risk. It's a risk management approach where you try to minimize your risk. Now, if you wait till the loan goes into bad or maybe the position where you need to write off, the amount could be very huge. Sometimes you might need maybe not be able to absorb it also. So as a risk management approach, SLFRS 9 says, look, if you have given a loan today, you have to look that loan or expect that loan to go bad at any point in time. So the risk is starting from day one itself. Therefore, you need to start making provisions also from day one, which is the origination point. Okay, so if a loan is on day one or having a days past due, which means the customer has failed to pay one installment. 30 days past due means one installment is due. Those loans are going into stage one. Then between 30 days of past due and 90 days of past due, you get those loans to be stage two. Stage two. From there onwards, you put everything under stage three. This is a fundamental classification to simplify the collective impairment process. We call it as staging of loans and advances for collective impairment purposes. And I would like to recall these three types of provisions again. CBSS started when all the 90 days gone. LKS 39 provision started with the objective evidence. Now SLFRS 9 starts from day one itself. Okay, this is again how you classify the three stages. When it is 0 days or 1 to 30 days past due, you put it under stage 1. 31 to 60 or 61 to 90, you put it under stage 2. More than 90, stage 3. Okay. And then there is a concept called 12-month expected credit loss and lifetime expected credit loss. So what does this mean is, for loans which are on stage 1, you consider or expect how this loan could behave in the next 12 months. And based on that, you make a provision. But for the remaining loans, you have to look at the entire remaining life of the loan. That is why we call it as lifetime expected credit loss. For the stage 1 loan, you have to assess immediately for the next 12 months. But for the remaining loans, which are under stage 2 and stage 3, you have to look at the lifetime expected credit loss. So don't worry too much about these, because I don't think that it will be tested to this level in your examination. But need to know the basics. Stage 1 will be tested using 12-month expected credit loss. 2 and 3, lifetime expected credit loss. Okay. This is
Sir, will they test us how to calculate all the things, sir?
This is the calculation. Now this slide is the calculation. This is what you need to know. Okay, this is a formula. I don't expect this formula to be given to you. So you have to remember this formula. In case if you are to calculate expected credit loss or collective impairment, this is how you calculate it. Okay. Another term given for collective impairment is expected credit loss. Please make a note. Another term for collective impairment is the expected credit loss. Part of it is expected credit loss, we call it as. So how does the ECL, the short form is ECL, how does the ECL works? It is the multiplication of exposure at default, probability of default, and loss given default. So these are three factors of the loan. Three factors of the loan. Exposure at default, probability at default, and loss given default. Okay, right. Now I will just give an understanding on this, but this is not in detail, just to know how it will work. So when you look at a loan, origination, and then let's say which is the maturity, we call it as maturity, right? So this loan has to be paid by installments. Installment 1, 2. So let's take this point. The customer pays the first installment, but not the second, right? So we are in this position. Okay. And you have a loan outstanding. Let's say 20 million. Okay, 20 million. But it will be paid in installment. Like this. Okay. Right. Now we say that ECL or the impairment, collective impairment, is equivalent to exposure at default, probability of default, and loss given default. This is the formula. Expected credit loss is equivalent to exposure at default, probability of default, and loss given default. Loss given default. So these are three elements of the ECL calculation. Now, what do you mean by exposure at default? So exposure at default means this is now the default point, or this is the point where there is an indication. Default point is starting. Okay, default point is starting. So now, as at the reporting date, that is when you are preparing the financial statement, you have to see from that date, when you discount all the future installments to this date, what would be your loan outstanding? So basically, I'm saying this is the loan outstanding, right? Without much complicating. I'm not going to complicate much because I know this is a complex subject. So you all also make it very simple. For your understanding, exposure at default is loan outstanding, because in examination, you will not be tested to calculate this. This is a long calculation. So don't worry. You will be given the exposure at default, or the loan outstanding will be taken as the exposure at default. So basically, we are talking about the amortized cost. Amortized cost. Then probability of default is, now you are here or here, and you are thinking that this loan is, there is a probability of going into bad, right? This customer is not, still he has not paid only one installment. So because of that, you can't say that this will be the end of the loan. No, we don't know. The very next, when it comes to month 3, he might come and pay both the installment. We don't know. But based on your prior experience, what you have, how you have dealt with the other loans that you have given in your business, you have to calculate what is the probability of this loan going into bad. That is what probability of default is. Based on my historical information, what has happened with the other loans, what has happened with these type of similar loans, you need to do a lot of calculations. So that's why I said these are using the scientific models that we do. So for exams, you don't have to worry, because the probability of default has to be given to you. Otherwise, you will not be able to calculate. That's the only thing that you can do in the exam, if you are required to calculate. So don't worry about how to calculate the probability of default, because it will differ from bank to bank, because depending on their model. So probability of default is a number which is a percentage, right? Which means what is the probability that this loan is not paid? That is that. Then there is another indicator which is again a percentage. We call it as loss given default. Loss given default. Now, what do you mean by that is, suppose if this loan goes as a loss, what is the probable amount that I might incur as a loss? Okay. So this is also again looking at the future, which I don't know. So what do we need to do is, I have to go back to my history and look at, for these kind of loans, what has happened in the future. Sorry, what has happened in the past. And I will apply that. So in simply put, let's take loss given default. If this bank gives a loan of 100 million, and when it goes to bad, they recover 60 million out of this. Okay. This bank in the history, in the past, when you take a loan of 100 million, they somehow manage to recover 60 million by going to courts, or maybe by executing the security or collateral, whatever, by any means, somehow they try and recover 60. So which means, what is their loss? 40 million. 40 million. So this is what I'm trying to explain. In the past, this company, how it has behaved, for every loan of 100 million, they have somehow tried and recovered 60 million. So as a result, their loss is 40 million, which means the LGD is 40%.
Excuse me, sir. Is this apply according to the customer repayment ability or according to the company decision?
This is based on what has actually happened in the past. Now say not for this customer, there may be other customers, no. So from other customers, if their loan repayments, if you look at it, how this company has recovered the loan. Now this is actual numbers that we are talking about. If you had 100 million, how much you have recovered? So I'm just taking an example, but this has to be calculated based on your historical information. So it will not be available, like say, if you go to the examination, you will not be able to calculate this because you don't get historical information. So all these information, LGD, PD, everything will be given to you. Don't worry about it. But the essence of this is based on the historical information. We are not looking at this loan. What has happened in the past for other loans? How this company has recovered the money. So what I'm saying is, if you take 100 million loan, they have recovered only 60 million. So 40 million has been always a loss. If that is the case, we call this LGD is 40%.
Sir, please re-explain LGD.
Yeah. Say now this company, you want the LGD, right?
Yeah, sir.
Right. Now let's say you are trying to calculate the expected credit loss, which is the collective impairment. So one of the factors is the current loan outstanding, which we can say exposure at default or amortized cost or loan outstanding. Then I explained of this amount, what is the probability that you can get this loan into a bad situation. So you get multiplied by a percentage means still it comes down. 100 multiplied by 20% means you get only 20 million. So further it comes down. Now of that amount also, what is the probable loss that we can incur? That is what we are trying to look at. So for that we need to know the LGD applicable for these type of loans. Now there is no standard number where you can go and put LGD is this. So that's why I said it is company specific. From bank to bank, from company to company, it might differ. So what this company has to do is, looking at this loan, they have to go back to their past records and see how they have recovered for other loans which have been already settled. Sorry. So when they look at their historical records, numbers, I'm just taking an example. You take 100 million of a loan, when it went to bad and almost dead, you managed to recover only 60 million out of this. How? It could be any way. You would have had a property mortgage, you could have sold it and recovered only 60 million. Anything could have happened. But the recovering capacity of this company is only 60 million. Sorry. Which means every time they incurred a loss of 40 million. So if I am to convert this into a percentage, 100 million out of that 40 million loss means my loss percentage is 40, which I call it as loss given default. Loss given default. This is the name. So probability of default, I have a percentage. Loss given default, I have a percentage. And here I have the amount. So what happens when you multiply by percentage? Percentage means what we are looking at as impairment is actually a percentage of this. A percentage of this. Okay. So basically that is what expected credit loss means. Expected credit loss means. So I would appreciate if you can take down this just for your understanding. Basically, that brings us to the end of impairment. There is one more slide which is on disclosure requirement. I will just show you that there is not much about so these are some of the information that you need to provide under SLFRS 7. Now we have been talking about SLFRS 9, which is about financial instruments, but the connected standard is SLFRS 7, which is on financial instruments disclosure. So when you look at the financial statements of companies, banks, especially the banks, they need to provide all these information that are there. Okay. So with that, I think we conclude the impairment or the SLFRS 9. So what I would suggest is Now we have come to almost the end of our course. We have done with the syllabus, except there is one more topic which I need to cover. I would like, meantime, you all to, by next week when we meet up, I want you to give an attempt to this question. September 2019, question number 3, which we will do it in the class. So I want you to go through that and try and see whether you can do something on that. Please don't try to refer to the model answer or anything. Try by yourself. Then we will understand how it is done in the like in the classroom. When we do it, you will know better. So make a note, September 2019, question number 3. Then September 2019, question number 5. That is also another question which has come on SLFRS 9. Then September 2017, question number 5, which also you can give an attempt. No problem. Okay. So those are the 3 questions as of now which you can remember. Sorry, look at September 2019, question 3, September 2019, question number 5, and September 2017, question number 5. Okay.
Sir, we didn't get that ratio model questions, sir. I think you said in the after the lecture.
No, I couldn't share it with the IBSL. We'll do it. Definitely we'll do it during this week so that you will get it. But I think past papers are available, right?
Sir, yeah, we have.
Right. Okay. Fine.
Thank
I don't
you,
know
sir.
whether September 2017, I wanted them to put it from 2018 onwards, but just see whether you can get one September 17 from the IBSL or maybe from one of your colleagues and see whether you can. But these papers, I think it's already available, so you can go through them. So what I want to say is now we are almost done with the syllabus. So what is left is actually one topic which is on statement of cash flows, SLFRS 7. Okay. So I don't want to start immediately with that and do it, because before without doing the financial statements, that is question number 1, no point in going to statement of cash flows. It will not give you any understanding. So first we need to do question number 1. Okay. So before that we need to do this SLFRS 9 questions, as well as then we have to look at question number 1. In addition to this, I think you can also look at January 2021 paper also. I think that is also given to you, right?
Yes, sir.
So even in that, it's a challenge to you. Go through and find out what is the question that has come on SLFRS 9 and see whether you can do that also. Okay. So we will do in the class, next class, I will do all those. And then I will start looking at question number 1 in the class. Okay. So my plan is that